Annayia, how are you feeling right now? I feel so fucking stupid, honestly. Like, so fucking stupid. You're not stupid. You're not stupid. He's a stupid ass. Okay, see? Trifling, actually.
She stayed loyal. She chose him. She said his name out loud in front of everybody, standing there at that fire pit with her heart on the line, and she meant every single word of it. And he walked in with somebody else. I need you to really sit with that for a second, because what happened on that recoupling wasn't just a dramatic TV moment. It wasn't just a storyline twist for the producers to capitalize on. What happened to Annayia on that night was something a whole lot of us have lived through, felt through, cried through. And maybe that's why it hit so different. Maybe that's exactly why you clicked on this video. And look, we all knew this was coming. We knew. The signs were there the whole time. Every time the cameras caught Casey going back and forth in his own head, every time he talked about Annayia like she was a burden he was choosing to carry instead of a woman he couldn't wait to get back to. Every time he smiled just a little too wide when TT's name came up, we saw it. You saw it. And still, some part of us wanted to be wrong. But we weren't wrong. We're never wrong about these things, are we? Let's go back to the beginning of that day because the setup matters. The girls had been waiting through sleepless nights, through bug-infested sleep and soul ties, through postcards that showed things they didn't want to see, through conversations that were supposed to be reassuring, but somehow left them feeling more alone than before. Annayia specifically had been running circles in her own mind all through Casa Amore. She had Carl right there. Carl, who by every account was steady and real and genuinely showed up for her. She even said it herself. She said he made her feel beautiful, made her feel secure, said he was so perfect, genuinely. Those were her exact words. And still, she chose Casey. Here's the thing though, that choice tells you everything you need to know about who Annayia is as a person. She didn't choose Casey because Carl wasn't good enough. She chose Casey because loyalty means something to her. Because she'd built something real with him, or at least she thought she had, and she wasn't willing to throw it away the second something shiny came along. And that's actually a rare quality. Rare. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Now, before I get to that walk-in moment, I want to talk about what was happening on the boys' side because the contrast is everything. Bryce. Let's just talk about Bryce for a second, because this man is the example that makes everything else look worse by comparison. He said he didn't kiss one girl outside of a challenge. He didn't cuddle with anyone. He said all he could think about the whole time was Trinity. And when he walked back through those doors, they were both in yellow and Trinity lost it. Actually lost it, crying, shaking, because she'd spent nights unable to sleep over this man. And he came back having done exactly what he said he would do. That's what loyalty looks like in action, not in words. Action. And then there's Zach, who didn't have a perfect Casa experience, but came back clean enough and honest enough about what happened and why, and Kata, who had every reason to walk away but chose to stay because she believed what they had was real. And you know what? Zach validated that. He came back alone. He said Kay's the girl he wants. Whatever happened over there, he didn't make the choice that Casey made. Now here's where it gets interesting, because there's a pattern here that nobody's really talking about. The guys who came back with the most to prove, the ones who actually had something to answer for, are the ones who came back alone. And the guy who had Annayia out here literally about to cry from gratitude, the one she spent night after night thinking about and hoping for, the one she said she was always going to pick. That guy walked in holding someone else's hand. You want to know what Casey said when he got back? He said, this decision isn't for Annayia. This is for me. Okay. And look, I'll be fair here for just one moment. Actually, let me rephrase that. I'll try to be fair, but even trying is hard on this one. Casey's reasoning was that with TT, it was effortless. That she's from South Central and he's from South Central. And when he talks to her, he sees his mom. He hears his sister. That's what he said. He said it felt like he already knew her. 3 days. 3 days and it felt like he already knew her. Meanwhile, Annayia stood up at that fire pit and talked about him like he hung the moon. Said she was grateful for every single day he was by her side, almost started crying just talking about what he meant to her. 3 days. And Annayya's weeks of loyalty just didn't count. I want to slow down here for a second, just for a moment, because I think about people watching this right now, and I know some of you aren't just watching this for entertainment. Some of you have been Annayia, not on a TV show, not in some villa in front of cameras, but in your real life. In your real relationships, you picked somebody consistently. You showed up. You chose them at every fork in the road, every time things got complicated, every time someone easier or newer came along. You stayed, and they didn't. And when they left, they probably had a speech too. something polished, something that was framed around their own growth, their own feelings, their own journey. And it still didn't make the hurt any smaller. That's what I kept thinking about watching Annayia stand there saying she felt stupid. She's not stupid. She just loved somebody who wasn't where she was. And that's not stupidity. That's just one of the most painful things a person can go through. Okay, back to it. Because we've got more ground to cover and some of it is going to make your blood boil. Let's talk about Corbin. Because Casey wasn't the only man on this episode who came back and blew up everything he claimed to have built. Corbin's situation was different, but the core of it was the same kind of disrespect, just with a different flavor. Here's what happened. Kenzie had stood up at that fire pit and just absolutely laid it out. She said she should have seen the red flags. She said everything he said to her was crap. She said he was a lying piece of something I can't repeat. And the reason she knew all of this wasn't because she heard rumors or had a feeling. She knew because the heart rate challenge was live, streamed into the villa, unedited. Unedited. Everything said, everything done. The girls saw all of it. And what they saw was Corbin, the same Corbin who had been standing on a dock telling Kenzie that what they had was real and genuine, and that he was catching feelings for her. Turn around the literal second the new Casa Amore girls showed up on screen and say Kenzie was thrown out the window. His words, thrown out the window. Now, the reason that's so enraging isn't just the betrayal. It's the audacity of the performance that came before it. He didn't just change his mind. He performed feelings. He looked Kenzie in the eyes at that dock. He said the words. He let her believe something that he apparently never believed himself the moment a new option appeared. That's not exploring. That's not even just being a flawed person navigating complicated feelings. That's putting on a show for one person while already looking for the exit. And look, Corbin came back with Porta, who genuinely seemed to believe that what she had with Corbin was real and solid. And she wasn't wrong to feel that way because he never showed her that side of himself. He showed that side of himself when he thought nobody from the villa was watching. That tells you exactly what kind of person he is when the audience he's performing for changes. Porta said something interesting in the middle of all that fire. She said sometimes people say things in the moment they don't mean. She was trying to extend grace, and that's a generous read of the situation. But here's the thing. Kenzie said she felt like he fooled her. And she was right. Being fooled by someone who is intentionally crafting a performance for your benefit isn't a character flaw on your part. That's manipulation. And the girls called it out exactly for what it was. Now here's where this connects to something bigger, something that runs under the surface of everything we watched on that episode. There is a very specific kind of man who knows how to read a room and give every woman in it exactly what she thinks she needs to hear, adjusting his performance based on who's watching. Corbin did it at the dock. Casey did it every time he reassured Annayia at the fire pit, and neither of them seemed particularly troubled by the gap between what they said and what they actually did. Not until they got caught. And that's the part that actually should make you pause and think. Because this stuff doesn't just live on reality TV. We all know men like this, and we all know women who, despite being smart, despite seeing some of the signs, gave the benefit of the doubt anyway because that's what decent people do. They assume the best. They choose loyalty. They believe that when someone looks them in the eyes and says something is real, it's real. And sometimes they're right. Bryce proved that this episode. Zach proved it in his own way too. But sometimes they're not. And the ones who aren't don't usually announce it in advance. Now I want to go back to something Dylan said when Kenzie chose him. Because it's worth noting what the contrast looked like in real time. Dylan had spent those days doing what a man who actually cares does. He set up a spa. He got Carl to play along as the chauffier. He found the exact spot where they'd shared their first kiss and made it into something special. He talked to her like she mattered. He listened. He said he'd been all smiles from the second she started speaking. And when he talked about why he was drawn to her, he didn't give some slick answer. He said she's smart, she's well-spoken, she's family-oriented, simple, real. That's not a performance. That's a man who's actually paying attention to who somebody is. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Why is the guy doing all the right things the one who almost gets overlooked, while the ones who talk the smoothest and perform the hardest get the benefit of the doubt for so long? Here's my read on it, and this is the part nobody really wants to say out loud, but we all know it's true. The guys who perform the best in the early stages of any situation, whether it's a reality show or real life, aren't always the ones who care the most. Sometimes they're just the most practiced. They know the right things to say because they've said them before. And the sincerity gap, the space between what they say and what they actually mean, doesn't show up right away. It takes distance. It takes pressure. It takes a situation like Casa Amore where suddenly the audience changes and the incentives shift and you find out pretty quickly who was building something real and who was building something for show. And by the way, there's something deeply uncomfortable about the fact that it took a live stream for the truth to come out. The girls didn't find out through a conversation. They didn't find out because the men came back and were honest. They found out because producers had everything captured and decided to air it uncut. Which means if there was no live stream, if the cameras had cut away at the right moment, or the editors had made different choices, some of those women would have walked into that recoupling with a completely different picture of what had been happening in their absence. And that's the reason for that. Well, you'll see why that matters in a second. Because what this episode really exposed isn't just that two men made bad choices. It exposed the infrastructure of performance that makes those choices possible. You can only throw someone out the window the second new options appear if you were never really committed in the first place. You can only walk back in with someone new after 3 days if the connection you had back home was more about what it gave you than about who the other person was. The behavior on Casa Amore was just the mask slipping. The real story started way before those 3 days. And Annayia knew something was off. She said so. She said she was in her head a lot. She said Casey always made sure to reassure her when she felt that way. But here's the thing about constant reassurance. It shouldn't be constant. If you're with someone who's genuinely all in, you shouldn't need to be talked back from the ledge every other day. The need for constant reassurance is sometimes its own signal. Not a signal that the person seeking it is insecure, but a signal that something in the situation isn't adding up and your gut knows it even when your mind hasn't caught up yet. Annayya's gut knew. She even said she hoped she wasn't wrong. She hoped. Not she knew. Not she felt certain. She hoped. That hope is the most heartbreaking part of everything she said that night. And now Annayia is single and vulnerable. Carl, who was steady and real and said she was beautiful and super smart and meant every word, got sent home. Casey, who spent 3 days with a new girl and decided that was enough to walk away from what he had, gets to stay and play. And the show goes on. Here's what I want you to think about before you click away from this video. What would you have done in Annayya's position? And I don't mean that as a judgment question. I mean it genuinely, because the pull of wanting to believe in something you've already invested in is real. It's not weakness. It's human. The sunk cost of having already chosen someone, already shown up for them, already defended them in your head and out loud to people who raised eyebrows about your choice, that's weight you don't just set down easily. And the people who exploit that weight, who know you're loyal and count on it while they're busy making different decisions out of your sight. Those people aren't just making a personal choice about a relationship. They're making a choice about what kind of person they're willing to be when nobody they need to perform for is watching. Corbin threw Kenzie out the window. Casey walked back in with TT, and both of them have explanations. Both of them have reasons. Both of them, I'm sure, have a version of this story where they're the ones who were just being honest with themselves and following their feelings and doing what was best for them. But Kenzie stood up at that fire pit and said everything she said to me was crap. And she was shaking. And she meant it. And Annayia said she felt stupid. And she's not. She's really not. But she probably feels it in her chest right now anyway. And Corey, who made a picnic breakfast from scratch and sat with Melanie and asked her what her favorite foods were and listened and just tried to make her feel seen for a few hours, that man walked out of the villa with nothing to show for it except his own integrity, which honestly, knowing what we now know about how some of the other men on that island operate, maybe that's more valuable than it looks. The question I'm leaving you with tonight is this. Why does the man who does everything right keep being the one who goes home empty-handed, while the men who are performing for audiences and saying whatever works in the moment keep getting to stay in the game? And more importantly, who else in that villa right now is still holding something back that the cameras haven't caught yet? Drop your answer in the comments. Because I know you saw exactly what I saw, and I know you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking.